Hi, this is the lecture for gas exchange and breathing regulation. We're going to be talking about oxygen and carbon dioxide and how they get around in your blood and throughout your respiratory system, as well as how your brain knows to control your breathing rate so that you don't get too much oxygen or too little oxygen, and the same for carbon dioxide. So, starting out within the lungs, we have alveoli here, and that's what's in the picture. And alveoli is plural, alveolus is singular. Now, we have the alveoli that are wrapped by a ton of capillaries. You'll notice that this picture is actually wrong. We should have this arrow going in the opposite direction because blood going into the lungs is going to be deoxygenated. It is going to pick up oxygen and then it is going to flow out. So Google Images is not always correct. These arrows should be flipped. So once we get into the alveoli and we are exchanging carbon dioxide and oxygen, this goes back to partial pressure of gases. So when we talked about inhalation, we end up decreasing the pressure within the thoracic cavity by increasing the volume of the thoracic cavity. So that way air moves it into your lungs. When you exhale, the pressure increases by decreasing the volume of the thoracic cavity, which forces air up and out. When we look at partial pressure of gases, we're still moving from high to low pressure. So the same rules are going to apply here as they did for what we talked about last week. Now within your alveoli, so this is the air that is inside of your lungs, we have a low amount of carbon dioxide compared to the amount of carbon dioxide found in your blood. And for the amount of oxygen, we have a relatively high amount of oxygen in the air compared to the amount of oxygen within your blood. So what's going to happen here is that carbon dioxide is going to go from high to low pressure from your blood into the air within your alveoli. And then oxygen is going to once again go from high to low pressure from the air in your lungs into the blood. So we're always going from high to low pressure. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are going to be moving in opposite directions because the blood in your lungs is going to have a higher amount of carbon dioxide that needs to get out, and the oxygen is trying to get into the blood within your lungs. So the blood leaving the capillary is going to be the same as the alveoli. We're looking at how much oxygen and carbon dioxide is found here in that exchange there. This entire exchange is called external respiration because we are doing this with the external environment, the air that you are inhaling. Now, once we take that blood to your cells, that is going to be called internal respiration. And we're going to see the exact opposite thing happen there as what happens in your lungs. For example, the oxygen is going to be leaving the blood in your capillaries and going into the cell space, whereas the carbon dioxide is going to be entering the blood. So it is doing the exact opposite of what we see here at external respiration. So how does the blood get from your lungs to your cells? Well, hopefully this is a little familiar. We have red blood cells which contain a protein called hemoglobin. You guys might remember hemoglobin has that iron that's in the middle of it, and that's what ends up making it nice and bright and red when it is attached to the oxygen. So 98% of your oxygen is going to attach to the hemoglobin and then be transported throughout your body until we eventually get to the capillaries where it is going to release the oxygen. Now that's only 98%. The other 2% is going to be dissolved in your blood. Water has the ability to dissolve any polar molecule, and that does include oxygen here. So oxygen is going to be released from the hemoglobin when we have three conditions. First, when we have a low amount of oxygen. Oxygen, just like anything else, wants to move from high to low. So once we get to an area where there's a low amount of oxygen, the oxygen on your hemoglobin is going to be released and go diffuse throughout the cells. Now, the second and third bullet point that I have here are kind of the same thing. Carbon dioxide is high, which means that your pH is acidic. So this is something we're going to look at on the next slide a little bit more. But carbon dioxide, when mixed with water, makes an acid. So the more carbon dioxide you have, the more acidic your blood is going to be. So a lot of carbon dioxide very acidic blood, which is a drop in pH. So that's kind of confusing, but try to keep that straight. It's always a good idea to have a pH scale next to you so that you can use that to imagine where we are moving on the pH scale. And then the third condition is going to be when your temperature is higher. This is going to be a great advantage for when you are exercising and you warm up a little bit. That's going to cause the oxygen to break off of the hemoglobin a lot faster, so that way you can get more oxygen into your cells for cellular respiration and maintaining that metabolic rate. So here we have a great diagram that shows external respiration. Over here, this is an alveolus, remember singular and alveoli. The oxygen is going to diffuse across the basement membrane into the capillaries where it is picked up by the hemoglobin. So now we have an oxyhemoglobin molecule. It is transported throughout the circulatory system, going through the left side of the heart and then into the systemic circuit, where it goes to the capillaries in between your muscles, your fingers, your bones, all of that stuff. The oxygen is then going to have three conditions which are going to cause it to be released from the hemoglobin molecule. First, we have a lower amount of oxygen that is found within the cells. We have a higher acidity because it is increased in carbon dioxide, and then it is also a little bit warmer there than where it is in the lungs. So, carbon dioxide now. This is not as simple as oxygen, just as a fair warning. First, about 7% of it can be transported through carbon dioxide that is just dissolved in blood. You guys might remember that 55% of your blood is plasma, and plasma is 98% water. So because of that, we have a lot of water for this carbon dioxide to dissolve into. From there, about 23% of it is carried by amine group of hemoglobin. So hemoglobin has multiple abilities. It can also carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. We've got both of those things there. And it is going to release the carbon dioxide when the partial pressure is low. So we go from high to low again, just like we did with oxygen. And then the rest of it, so 70% of it, is actually going to be carried as a bicarbonate ion, which we're going to get into here in a second. So we get the carbon dioxide, it accumulates within your blood, especially within the capillaries, because that's where carbon dioxide is generated. You guys might remember it is generated during the citric acid cycle of cellular respiration. So carbon dioxide is either combined with the hemoglobin, it is dissolved within the blood itself, or it is turned into bicarbonate ion, which you can see right in here. This is going to be your bicarbonate ion. And then eventually that is going to be taken to the lungs where the carbon dioxide is released and you exhale it. So let's talk a little bit more about this bicarbonate ion, seeing as it is 70% of the way carbon dioxide is carried throughout your blood. This reaction is going to use an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. Great little tip for you in case if you've never heard this before. All enzymes are going to end in ase. So anytime you see a word that ends in ase, that is an enzyme, and typically it does the thing that is before the ase. So carbonic anhydrase is going to take off a hydrogen from that carbon dioxide molecule. Yeah, so it does the thing that the ACE comes after. And that is found within red blood cells themselves. So red blood cells have a lot of different stuff, not just hemoglobin. They also contain this enzyme. And this is your reaction. We start out with carbon dioxide mixing with water. This produces carbonic acid. Same stuff that we're going to find in like soda or pop. And carbonic acid is not necessarily the best to have in your body because it's an acid. So we want to turn that into a more benign form so that it can't harm any cells when it accumulates in concentration. So we form the bicarbonate ion in order to create that acidic pH, but that extra hydrogen that is broken off of the bicarbonate ion is going to combine with the hemoglobin in order to minimize that effect. So we end up going through this reaction here, and you can see we start out here with the bicarbonate ion. It's going to eventually form carbonic acid, and then eventually we are producing the carbon dioxide to then exhale again. So we're doing a lot of this converting here Essentially, this is what's going to help maintain the pH of your blood while getting rid of that carbon dioxide and making sure that you don't get harmed from any of that. So, how do you control your breathing rate? I'm sure you guys aren't even thinking about how fast or slow you're breathing or just breathing now in general until I say something about it. And that's because breathing is primarily involuntary. However, you can override that involuntary control by contracting your muscles. The intercostal muscles found in between your rib cage, because costal means ribs. So inter is between ribs, and then the diaphragm, which sits right below the thoracic cavity. So you can control your own breathing rate, which I'm going to ask you to do after this video. But most of the time, your brain is in control of your own breathing rate. So that way you don't have to think about it. We have two areas that this is going to happen, but it's both within, or they are both found within the brain stem. We have two spots here within the medulla oblongata, and then another spot here within the pons. Now, the way that your body is going to control this is using chemosensitive areas. So we are looking at the amount of carbon dioxide, hydrogen, as well as oxygen here. If you have a rise in carbon dioxide, which means a drop in pH, because more carbon dioxide means more acidic, which means drop in pH, yep. So if you have a rise in carbon dioxide, that can trigger your body to breathe. If you have low oxygen, that is going to trigger you to breathe. There are some things, though, that can prevent you from breathing, like the inflation reflex. Your lungs can overinflate like a balloon, and we don't want your lungs to. So the inflation reflex prevents you from inhaling too much that you could possibly cause harm. And then, of course, if you are upset, if you are in fear, or you are in pain, that can also change your breathing rate. So let's look a little bit more at carbon dioxide and how that can alter your breathing rate. If you are hyperventilating, hyper means a lot. So if you are hyperventilating, you are breathing a lot, that is going to get more carbon dioxide out of your blood and is going to lower the amount of carbon dioxide there. So it is going to increase the pH. We are lowering the amount of acid present in your blood. That is going to increase the pH. This can be dangerous. We want to maintain that beautiful Goldilocks zone of pH within your blood. It ranges from 7.36 to 7.45, as you can see right here. Typically, people will just abbreviate it and say 7.4 is the ideal range, but it can really change a little bit. If you have too little carbon dioxide, your blood pH is going to be closer to the 7.45. If it gets past that, that's when we're going to start entering dangerous territory. So it is a good idea, if someone is hyperventilating, to have them breathe into a bag for a little bit. That way they can restore some of their carbon dioxide back into their respiratory and blood system. So it's not always the case that you should give someone a bag to breathe into and out of, but if they're getting close to the point that they are feeling like lightheaded, they could pass out, it is a good idea to have them breathe into a bag. That way some of that carbon dioxide is going to go back into their circulatory system. Now, on the opposite side, if someone is hypoventilating or breathing too little, then that can cause their body to want to gasp for air and get rid of all of that carbon dioxide. Too much carbon dioxide is going to make your blood pH lower. It's going to make it more acidic. And so that is going to cause you to gasp for air and get rid of that carbon dioxide. This is a great summary slide of everything we went over. You have the medulla oblongata as well as the pons, which is going to look at that carbon dioxide and pH level. And then you also have some peripheral chemoreceptors found in the carotid arteries and in the aortic arch that are going to be looking for the oxygen concentration as well. Make sure that you at least have enough oxygen to keep things running. And last stuff, you can have an alteration in your breathing rate if you are scared or you are in pain. And you can control your own breathing rate, which is what I'm going to ask you guys to do next. So you have a challenge. How long can you hold your breath? Please don't hold it any longer than 2 minutes. And do your best to set a control beforehand. So just try to hold your breath without doing anything special, and then give yourself a few moments, and then try to alter the pH of your blood, and then see if you can hold your breath for any longer. I hope you guys have a good day and that you are all staying healthy. Bye.